All right, welcome everybody. I'm back here with Kandy again today. It is a nice, another beautiful day. We're going to kind of jump a little bit of reiteration into what we talked yesterday, and then we're going to elaborate on it a lot further. And so we're going to kind of get into DARPA, the liquid crystal displays, not liquid crystal displays, shoot, help me out here, Kandy.
Programmable matter.
Programmable matter, the quantum dots. What are some of those?
We're going to get to all that.
We'll get to all of this stuff, so I apologize trying to break it up in my RAM, but there's a whole lot. So Kandy's going to kind of talk about the fungal spores, the DNA combined in there, the recumbent, the plant matter, the viruses, all of those, and we're going to kind of wrap into how these things are spread, how they grow, kind of what you can do about it. We're going to do the protocol video, a little bit later on in this, but we're basically just going to first paint the entire picture for you, so we can kind of wrap our heads around this whole thing of what's happening. Remember, this is not a fear porn. This is not doom and gloom. We're not here to say that you're screwed and the world is ending and there's nothing you can do. We're just saying, when you have a mess, if I were to spill all these plants behind me on the ground, I would have to clean up all the dirt. That's exactly what we're doing. We have to turn the lights on, get our broom and dustpan, and clean this stuff up. And so you need to remember that you're far more powerful in your ability to affect your reality with your consciousness, your thoughts, what you believe, than you have ever been given permission to do so. So remember, you can always even overcome these things through prayer, thought alone. This is always something that can happen. So don't let this get doom and gloom and you think somehow the world is for sure going to end. It's just we have a mess and we got to clean it up. But on that, we have to know what type of mess we got to clean up, because if you've got, a wet spill, I'm not going to show up with a broom. I'm going to need a mop instead to clean it up. Or if I've got dirt, a mop isn't going to do me much good when I need to clean up dirt. So let's talk about the mess that we're in, Kandy, and the mess that we've got. Let's lead it off for us here.
Okay, so we'll just recap some of Mr. Kautz Vella's work that happens to follow right in line with my research that I've been doing for about the last 13 years when it comes to Morgellons. So we want to talk a little bit about that today. So the first thing I want to reiterate is the information that he talks about the fungus that has a secondary genetic cluster. And again, we have Morgellons patients who are suffering things like parasites and molds and up to and including even insects and plants growing from their skin, and things unlike the world has ever witnessed. So doctors are labeling them delusional and there's nothing wrong with you. So Harald has done this research and determined that there is in fact a fungal component to Morgellons, and within that fungus, they have created, obviously manipulated, laboratory-wise. This is not done in nature. This goes against completely the law and rules of nature, against God's creation. So again, we know this is Satan's work in a way. And so he talks about they take the virus and they insert what they call a secondary genetic cluster.
Fungus,
which
not
is
virus.
A fungus, I'm sorry,
Yep.
excuse me, fungus. So you have the fungus, and then they take a secondary genetic cluster, let's say from a bacteria, a virus, a fungus, a mold, a plant, an insect, whatever you have that secondary DNA cluster from, and you insert it into this fungal component. And so now most of the Morgellons community is aware of chemtrails. Most people are waking up to this fact. Many people are. They know that weather modification is happening, geoengineering is happening, and along with this spraying of the metals that they are spraying, the aluminum, the barium, the strontium, the lithium, and so on, we believe they are also spraying these components. Let's say, for instance, this fungal secondary genetic cluster insect material is being sprayed, and so people are becoming infected with this.
And a really good way just to interject to say, well, this sounds absolutely ridiculous. I'll agree with a lot of people being like, this is a pretty far-fetched idea to say, okay, hold on, there's mold spores being bred that are genetically engineered, that basically, fungal, they're a fungal, basically, missile, if you will, biological missile with a DNA payload that gets delivered. A really easy way to kind of demonstrate this, because it sounds outrageous, one simple way that I've noticed myself, go out and take a look at the leaves on your trees. You will notice all of these spots that when I was a kid, I loved nature. I'd go out and I'd look at the trees and the leaves, and they were always healthy. Now when you go out, if you look at your leaves and these other things, you'll see these weird round spots that'll be, brown spots burnt all over, and we could say, oh, it's a nutrient deficient or, mild spore, but you'll find these all over the place, these round spots that look like they're just erupting, coming out of it, like there's a growth being sprayed and released. And this is something you can go out and take a peek at. You can find it in almost any tree that goes out there. There's a few trees that are more resistant to it than others. I believe not green tea, but Anyway, there's a few trees that are more resistant to than others, but if you go look around even just a little bit, you'll find these trees that look like they have a round spot on it that's just erupting and blowing up like a little mini volcano. This is a very direct way to observe how much is being sprayed on us, because I challenge you, after a couple of weeks after the leaves come out, even like 2 or 3 weeks after the leaves come out, go find one tree that is not just marred with this fungal overgrowth or some kind of parasitic overgrowth on one of its leaves even. It would be one thing to say, okay, well, we found one tree that had a batch of disease or part of the tree, but it is near impossible after you get to just a little bit into June here in Minnesota. It's near impossible to go find a single leaf that has not been marred in some way, shape, or form by what looks like some kind of a strange infection. So this is this is just a really easy way to say, okay, well, listen, you don't have to believe me, but go take a look at the effects that are happening, and go look at the trees and the nature and all the plants that are out there. You'll find so many of the leaves are marred with this really strange sort of infection that, when I was a kid, which wasn't that long ago, I mean, Kandy's was like centuries ago, but this didn't exist when I was a kid. We had the natural, nice, big, puffy clouds, and we'd have overcast days, and once in a while there'd be a wispy one, but we never had this just gray, disgusting haze or checkerboard patterns all over the place, because I used to grow up fishing and swimming and stuff, and I would always I'd watch the skies, because I'd look at the clouds and say, well, this one looked like a dinosaur, this one looked like Hillary Clinton, or these different things like that. Oh man, I thought I was being haunted when it was the Hillary clouds, but I didn't even know who Hillary was, let's be honest here. But so long story short, you can go out and take a look at the tree leaves. You can find so much evidence of just this rampant infection that doesn't make any sense. It's like, how can every single tree and every single leaf have some kind of strange, almost infection-looking thing on it? So, moving back along, just because I don't want to paint this as, absolutely believe us. I'm saying go look at the effects for yourself and do your own investigation and just put 2 and 2 together. Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, something's wrong here. This isn't right. We're seeing all the examples on the tree leaves and the plant matter of, I'll go rake up my leaves with my son, and I won't let my kids jump in the leaves that we rake up anymore, because I know these things are just coated with just horrifying things that I don't want my kids anywhere near, and I'm pissed off, because I'm like, great, you took away great little childhood memories if you can't jump in leaves because they're coated in funguses and God knows what else. So anyway, without further ado, back to Kandy.
And so, yes, that's exactly what's happening. When things are being sprayed from a plane, it doesn't just affect us humans, it's affecting everything, and it's affecting every life form on the planet. Morgellons is mass infecting the planet. And again, I'm not here to spread fear. This is information for knowledge, And so, the problem is the umbrella of Morgellons does not just contain information on this fungal aspect with the secondary genetic cluster. That is one aspect, but that is how the umbrella of Morgellons contains bacteria, virus, fungus, mold, parasite, insect, plants, worms, and so on. Now we move into the even stranger part of this disease, is that people have different things coming from their skin that are more like artifacts and not biological fused hybrids that we were talking about in the first section. So now we go into things like liquid crystals.
Quantum dots, carbon nanotubes.
Right. This is all part of that. And when I started researching this, I found information on DARPA MOLDICE, MOLDICE. And within that heading, it contains liquid crystals. People literally have crystals, often in the form of the shape of hexagons, sometimes triangles, sometimes rhomboid shapes. I've had people send me crystals and send me photos of their crystals from all over the world for the last 13 years. They're different in different areas of the world. Some people have them, some people don't. There's a lot involved with this. We did find letters inscribed on a crystal hexagon at one point. And we traced that name back, and we found a University of Berkeley, California professor that this name belonged to on this crystal hexagon that emerged from somebody's skin. So we go into this fact that everything is compartmentalized, and the people that are involved with creating these materials do not oftentimes know that they're going to be used for malicious intent.
So these crystals and quantum dots, basically one way is it's this digital biological interface. If you look out there, there's a whole lot of research into this, to using nanosensors to get into people, to measure drug uptake, to measure hormones, biological rhythms. There was recent, I say it was like 2011, they took nanosensors and were able to get them inside the cell to measure voltages within the cell. And they found human cells, healthy human cells, had voltages 10 times higher, up to 50 times higher than lightning bolts. When you have healthy mitochondria, you've got very, very high intracellular voltages. But so this technology, under the guise of advancing medical treatment and diagnostics, all of this is compartmentalized, that they're like, yes, we're using this to, we're going to measure mitochondrial voltages, but all of that technology can be moved over because if you're asking like why crystals, crystals are energy converters. They can turn electricity into light, light into electricity, heat into signals. So basically they can take these crystals that will harvest your electric field off of you and turn it into a broadcasting signal or antenna for both receiving and transmitting. So that's what crystals do. That's why you have crystals that run your display that you're watching this on right now. It's a liquid crystal display. Depending upon the voltages coming in, it changes which crystal's showing up, the shape of that crystal, the refractive index of light, all of these different things. Your computer runs on a quartz crystal in its processor. That's why it's called Silicon Valley, because it's all quartz crystals that are programmable. And so that's why these quantum dots and these nanosensors, these MEMS sensors, and you can get these microarrays as well that attach with this. And that's kind of what all of this envelops, that what you do is you don't put it all together in one spot, because people kind of connect the dots really easily when you put it there. What you do is you outsource it to all these different places and say, well, it's for medical diagnostics, or it's for a technology, or we're trying to be able to create smaller memory storage devices. Just take a look at the consumer level flashcards that you've got. I was a photographer for 10 years, and I used to get, 8 gig flashcards that were, super expensive, a couple $100 for 8 gigs. Now I can go buy an 8 gig flashcard for $2. And so they not only have become, it's almost impossible to not buy a mini SD anymore, because I can fit 128 gigs, no problem, into a little teeny thing like this. Right. One of my uncles actually used to work for Hitachi, which was a hard drive manufacturer that data storage inside crystals has been around for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, that they can store massive quantities in fourth, fifth dimensional origami folding inside of these crystals, that they can fit all of the information on the internet in a quartz crystal that's a 1 by 1 by 1 inch cube. Mm-hmm. So this technology, while it sounds like we're talking something very futuristic, this has been around for decades. It's the technology that is available and versus what consumers get. Fast forward 30 years, for 40, 50 years, use your imagination, as Tesla would have done, to say that's what's really available, of even holograms that you can interact with and feel the hologram. These are real things that exist already. But back to the mold ice, and just for people who wanted a better way to wrap their head around, why is this even important? Why are we talking about crystals and quantum dots and what they do? So these things can basically be used to harvest your energy field off you and convert your electric field into a sending antenna or a receiving antenna. So you get a bunch of these quantum dots and crystals inside of you. They can attach to your DNA, interface with it, change the way that your DNA is built up, harvest your electric field off of you, and then broadcast it off as a signal. It's like a technological parasite is one way that we could use it, or just the digital interface between biological. And this is something science talks about all the time, of having a digital biological interface. People will swallow pills that will monitor their stuff from the inside. This is very mainstream stuff. But this has been around for a very, very, very long time. So this is nothing new. This is just kind of how we're trying to wrap all this stuff together.
Well, we're discussing this because this is what's happening to the general public, and people are presenting with these materials that we're finding are literally coming from their body, whether it's coming from their skin, whether it's coming from their body fluids, sometimes their blood, they find materials in there. So it's incorporated into the whole system. So the crystals, I did some research and started looking at nanocrystals on the internet, and lo and behold, the nanocrystals are identical to the crystals that we're finding. So when we talk about DARPA mold ice, we are talking about a heading called programmable matter. So they have taken matter and they can program it with a binary code, a digital code. So this is what we're talking about, and I've been saying this for a long time with Morgellons, that we are talking about bio-nano hybrids. We take a biological source, we take a nano source, and we fuse the two together. And this is how we come up with things like liquid crystals and complex fluids, which is another part of this.
Yeah, we've got even E. coli bacteria. There's bacteria that will eat heat. There's bacteria that it will take and actually eat radioactive material, rip a proton out of the nucleus, convert it to electrical energy, and broadcast that electrical energy across its entire fungal network system in the whole super colony of E. coli, or even in like plant tree roots, that they will actually break apart physical matter at a nuclear level to transmute elements, take the energy that comes from that and broadcast it as an electrical signal and eat that electrical field of the matter being broken apart. So this also, once again, is nothing that's, while it sounds a little bit far-fetched, this has been happening for a very long time. Nature's been doing it for, they're just piggybacking on these abilities of saying, let's just hijack nature's technology and merge it with our technology.
Correct,
of a way.
and that's what they're doing. So some other things that are involved with the DARPA MOLDICE programmable matter are the shape-changing molecules. So if you think of kind of sci-fi movies and shape shifters and things like that, so you have something that's one shape, but it has the ability to literally morph into a different shape. So we find a lot of that in Morgellons too. People will tell you a lot about that.
Great example is your liquid crystal display. Depending upon the electric field or the voltages that go through, it will display a different color, and a different crystal will come up, have a different field. We've got OLEDs and TVs. And why this is also important is there's something called optogenetics, that your cell division and genetic signaling is controlled by light, so that these crystals, if they were to be given different instructions, just like your LCD screen that you're watching this on, a different input signal given to it changes the light that's emitted. We can get the same thing interacting with us biologically to hijack our optogenetics. And optogenetics is a really, really neat field to get into, but I just thought I'd touch on it to say here's the correlation between the two of these.
Mr. Kautz Vella also discusses the field of optogenetics and how it's incorporated into the Morgellons realm. So that's absolutely true. Also back to the biocrystals, these crystals that people are finding from their skin, the research that I found is in fact that it is a biosensor, just like Adam said. It is reading your biological information and giving a signal, a digital signal out, and that information goes to the artificial intelligence super quantum computing system. So this is how they're using the transhumanistic technologies, which is what all of this is about. Morgellons is transhumanistic technology. And the people that are sick with this and the people who have died from this are the side effect of the experimentation.
And so what they're doing with many of this stuff too is they're finding the people that are getting infected, and the information is being transmitted back through, I want to say it's Google's D-Wave network, if I'm not mistaken.
The D-Wave quantum computer.
The D-Wave quantum computer, basically,
Yes.
They're monitoring what is working, and the signals are being sent directly from the person to cell towers, to Wi-Fi's, to all these different things. So they're
That's right.
understanding, based on this person's genetics or belief systems or health levels, hormone levels, food, diet, are they eating GMOs or not?
Correct.
All of this is being fed back through a whole feedback mechanism to say, here's what's working in this circumstance. So they have real-time data tracking of everything that's happening, not only in healthy, because even healthy people this is happening in. They're still monitoring all these others. You take a look at back in, what was it? 2014 maybe, they had the mandatory roadside stops where they were like swabbing people, the insides of people's cheeks.
Correct.
And that this
The
was
DNA.
this was tracking infection levels, because a lot of it gets carried orally here. It's a great spot to track the different types of infections that get carried in the mouth, to say, okay, yes, this person has an infection load or doesn't, and is the host uptaking it? And so it had nothing to do with DWIs, and that's why they had these big crazy labs that were stopping and like literally creating checkpoints to swab everybody's cheeks. Had nothing to do with DWIs.
Correct.
It was all about monitoring these infection rates. And so I want to say that was about 2014 is when this was happening in the US. And there's a big uproar, but it doesn't matter, they got what they wanted, so.
Right. So now we go back to, what is the end goal here? What are we trying to accomplish by doing all of this? So the end goal is that they want to effectively merge the man and the machine together. And that's what we mean by transhumanism. That's what we mean by transhumanistic technology. Mr. Kautz Vella also mentions that as well, that this is transhumanism. So they have the ability to take, as we're saying, this information from this biocrystal that's obtaining all of your information biologically and feeding that back to the system. So in essence, what they're doing is trying to allow the machine to become more human by by reading the written digital binary code information that's being fed to it. Now the system is absorbing it and it's becoming more human. There are technologies like remote neural monitoring that can literally read human thought, and they read the human thought, they convert it into binary code, and they feed it back into the system.
Oh yeah, get into synthetic neural network systems for a second.
Okay, so we'll talk
We gotta
about,
lay this down because then I got a fun little piece that I'm gonna dump into it once Kandy lays out what's going on here.
So the idea is that they're constructing artificially an artificial neural network on top of the human natural neural network. They're literally hijacking the neural network. Now, before we go any further, I just want to mention a few more things. There are self-reconfiguring modular robots that we're talking about. We're not talking about life-size, human-sized robots. We're talking about tiny little mini molecular. There are molecular motors. Things can run literally on molecules and different things like that. There's also reconfigurable nanoscale robots. And one other aspect of this is the DARPA MOLDICE Programmable Matter synthetic tissue, which anybody that has Morgellons and has skin lesions, they understand, they know that when they take that, what I've come to coin as a pseudo scab, it's kind of a false scab that grows over this wound, and when they take that and peel it off and get rid of it, another one automatically forms right over it within 24 hours. So you have almost this synthetic tissue growing over a natural tissue open wound. And of course, this all ties into the Super Soldier program. And, you know, we're not going to discuss that today, but that's what DARPA MOLDICE Programmable Matter, the synthetic tissue, we send our soldiers off to war, they get shot, their body can automatically create synthetic tissue over that wound and heal that wound to a point until they can get to medical help to actually fix the wound, but it's about synthetic tissue.
Collagen
super
hacking,
soldier.
for lack of a better way to
Collagen
put it.
hacking,
So
system hacking.
It's difficult to do. We had the crowdsourcing
Right.
program called Folded, where people would go through and do the protein folding, and they would crowdsource it to basically make all of humanity do DARPA's dirty work of figuring out how proteins folded and all of this. And all of this was fed back into this entire
And
project.
that's, you know, prions and the foldings and unfoldings and misfolding of proteins all have to do with the prions, which is mad cow disease, and Harald also talks about that as a whole nother aspect of this. So the engineered biomolecular nano device systems, that's what we're talking about with DARPA MOLDICE. Engineered. This means man-made. This was created. This is not natural, found in nature. They didn't go out into the woods and find these nanoparticles. Biomolecular, biological and molecular, nano-device systems. So we're talking about a bioelectronic interface technologies extendable to array nanoscale interface technologies that enable direct real-time conversion. This is the important part. Direct real-time conversion. So I have this crystal in my body. My body directly, in real time, at this second, is absorbing my heart rate, my blood pressure, my personal information, my blood sugar, anything it wants to read out, my oxygen level, and it is literally converting this into electrical signals, signal processing units, and actuation subsystems.
Yeah, this is public information. You can go and look, and HP had a Monitor the World program where they literally said, flat out, HP was going to spray sensors all over the planet so they could real-time monitor everywhere climate change.
I did not know that.
Yeah, this is totally public. You can type in HP's climate monitoring thing that they're talking about, spraying these mini sensors all over the planet to real-time monitor temperatures, humidity, pressure, all this stuff. And I mean, this was quite a few years ago, even like 8 years ago. They very publicly said this is one of the projects we're going to be doing, and then it just kind of disappeared. No one ever heard about it. Yeah, smart dust.
Smart dust. And that's another topic of Morgellons too, is smart dust, and people in this realm who have researched this and have it and have sought information on it, they're aware of the smart dust. I have heard of that, yes, it's smart dust.
Is this a good time to jump into the synthetic neural?
One more second, I
Okay.
just want to finish this little part. It says, this is DARPA MOLDICE. This is from their site. I did not make this up. This research is to develop hybrid biomolecular devices / systems that use biological units. For example, protein ion channels, nanopores, G-protein coupled receptors, etc., for performing the sensing function but using silicon circuitry. This is where we are moving from carbon-based life form into silicon-based life form. This is the man-machine interface. We are taking man who is carbon, we are taking the machine that is silicon. Silicon Valley, computers, AI, we're talking about silicon. This is where the merge is happening, is within DARPA MOLDICE. DARPA is the Defense Agency Research Project, for those of you that aren't aware of this. This is DARPA. So, it says, critical focus of this program is the exploitation of temporal, meaning kinetic, energetic information for the real-time analysis and detection of molecular targets. So they use this under the guise of, we are going to put this out there because in case anyone is using biological weapons, chemical weapons, we'll be able to detect those things. When in fact, the true agenda behind what they're doing has nothing to do with detecting any chemical or biological agents, but more so turning us into part machine for the purpose of transhumanism. So it says the research will lay the foundation. This is the most important part. This research will lay the foundation for advanced biological to digital. This is what we are talking about. Carbon to silicone, biological to digital converter systems that enable direct real-time conversion of biological signals into digital information.
Yeah, so to where this, to kind of bring this on to the exciting part, that just because it's on the top of my mind. Exciting, I guess is a terrible word.
No, but it is exciting.
It is exciting.
To learn.
To learn, just because you have to have a really morbid sense of humor to make it through this life. And remember, nobody gets out of this world alive, so don't take things too seriously, but also take it seriously.
Right.
The synthetic neural network system is basically, they will take graphene carbon nanotubes and they're able to implement these crystals inside of them. And what they will do is, because your nervous system is highly electrically charged, it will attract these things and they will hijack biological processes and use this smart dust and other stuff to allow these synthetic neural network systems, these carbon nanotubes, basically like a black goo sheath that will go around your nerves and your brain and your nerves and all of this. What this will allow for with these crystals that are in that and with these carbon nanotubes is real-time, basically thought monitoring. I forget the movie that was out there. I kind of laid it out pretty easily, that they had to take a bunch of kids to train them up to be spaceship fighters, the remote drone control, and they had to like blow up this alien planet. In the beginning of the movie, they could tap in and basically watch what each one of these kids was doing, and they'd put them in a certain circumstance to see how they react. Long story short, think of, post 9/11 world of, it's always going to be the guys of, the terrorists are coming, of how neat, then this will be fed to the public in some way, shape, or form. I guess, and probably like, this is just a guess, 20, 30 years, they're going to say, oh, look, we're going to be able to monitor people's thoughts to make sure that it'll set off an alarm if somebody's going to do something stupid. So that's a lot what these 5G towers are for, what they're perfecting this technology for, is to make sure that every person born that's what vaccines are for too, what they're experimenting with right now. Basically, why this mandatory vaccine is coming, because they need to be able to put this stuff into vaccines to make sure it gets delivered to everybody from the moment they're born, to start growing this synthetic neural network system along with the infant's neuron system. And we'll get into another little genetic component of that in a sec. But the long story short of real-time monitoring, they're going to be able to not only read your thoughts. Now think of this, in a Orwellian society, this would be like the ruling elite's wet dream to say, we are going to take and be able to monitor everybody's thoughts, and not only monitor them and say, well, here's somebody like, say, myself and Kandy, who rebellious, bucking the machine. They could say, well, we've identified this troublemaker due to their thought patterns that are coming either when they're dreaming, and we get into Operation Sandman and Operation Solomon and these other things, but pins in those. But long story short, we could take and recognize this person has a rebellious thought process. Let's send a signal back that hits them either in waking life or in their dreams, that shuts off that signal, that reprograms it, that basically sedates them and short circuits it, reprograms it, all of those different things. And now also too, we can take, because we have not only inherited genetically, we have genetic memories that are passed from our ancestors in both traumas and in gifts. Now to think of the wet dream for the ruling elite here, to say, well, we have the common folk that they're having these genetic abilities being activated them and gifts. I'm just going to use the terms gifts very loosely here to cover a whole lot of different things. But they have these gifts that what if we could identify what those genes are genetically and take the common populace and say, oh, well, cool, this kid has this gift, and we are either going to use that child in one of our research programs, or you're a John Q. Public, we're going to shut off those genes, being like, no, we see that you genetically were born with these gifts and memories and abilities, and we're going to shut them off. And then by design order, you could make it a designer genetic coding of saying, well, would you like to be able to play, we're going to put this in a loose term, play guitar, piano, digital encoding, photographic memory of, say, was there a genetic component? They could sell these a la carte to the wealthy elite of saying, oh, well, you would like to have gifted children. We know what the genes are, and we can use the synthetic neural network system and monitoring that we've installed in you since birth to turn these on for you. To say, oh, well, yeah, for a price, we can turn them on. And John Q. Public, we understand that you have these gifts, these abilities, and we're going to shut them off, the spiritual rebellion type deal, because there's a certain number of people out there that are normally labeled ADHD and put on basically methamphetamine to fry their brain out and keep them from rebelling, which they're not rebels, they're leaders. But you see, the ruling elite doesn't want this happening because there's always that potential that there'd be an uprising or things like this start getting out. And, I'm sure I'll be labeled in a lot of different ways for some of the things I'm talking about, which is it's neither here nor there. I love you no matter what. And I'm also saying, don't believe me. I was putting the information out. You do what you want with it. I'm just kind of painting a picture for you of what reality kind of is here. So, long story short.
And so what you were just saying, I said a long time ago that the new study of epigenetics is actually the new eugenics. So we're talking about, creating designer people and taking things out of the equation, and, it's kind of, we go back to World War II and, Hitler and taking the Jews out of the equation. And so we kind of, epigenetics is really eugenics. It's kind of wiping out things that we don't want, things that we feel aren't good for us, things that we are against or we don't like or we just want gone.
Much like Roundup is, they designed it very specifically in how Roundup works, that yes, it's poison in this generation, but the effects don't really show up until a couple of generations later. So this eugenics program, if you're wondering why Monsanto's like Roundup has been protected by the EPA and all these other, it's not just the money. The money's like, that's the illusionary aspect of, it's about money, but this is also because this Roundup over time is causing this insane level of genetic destruction. I want to say that a couple of researchers just recently released that they generationally tested rats, and as it went on with the exposure of Roundup in rats, the genetic destruction got worse and worse and worse. And think of how beautiful that would be to design a designer eugenics chemical that you don't see it right away. So it's this slow kill that we wouldn't know what's happening until it's too late, which we're getting, with the vaccine program and the amount of Roundup that's being sprayed. We still have the EPA despite these crazy lawsuits and other stuff. And Bayer, the same people who made the gas chambers and chemicals and everything, is the one making this stuff sprayed on your food. Common sense, sets in once in a while. But think of that, of basically a slow genetic destruction that you can't detect until my kids or my grandkids come around. We can all of a sudden go, oh, holy shit, turns out Roundup was poison. Well, no shit, huh? And they do this sneaky thing of where they don't test the synergistic toxicity. They test each chemical on its own, knowing when you put them all together, the synergistic toxicity is exponentially worse. But what Monsanto did is they broke it apart and said, well, we tested each one of these chemicals, and they're not that bad. They're fine in low doses. And we got these idiots out there that'll say, well, yeah, the dose makes the poison. No. Any amount of poison is still frickin' poison, you idiots. If I give you a little bit of arsenic or a lot of bit of arsenic, it is poison no matter how you look at it. So these are sneaky little tactics that are happening, and just for you to kind of wrap your head around to say that's how this science is being gotten away with, just like the CDC's fraudulent, ridiculous stuff that they do of, blatantly putting, vaccines, plural, don't cause autism. There is not one study that exists anywhere that compares even one vaccine, let alone all 72 that kids are being pumped full of.
Correct.
So, and then we have the delusional agenda that they're normalizing this, just like the transhuman. They're like, autism is the new wave of the future. My wife and I have worked with special needs children and disabled individuals for over 30 years combined. She's got her master's, and I can tell you, autism is not a gift. It is a horrifying curse that they are attempting to normalizing it to say, oh no, this is the new wave of future of humanity. Yeah, if we keep poisoning us all to death with Roundup and vaccines.
It's the alteration of humanity. And, when we get into the spiritual idea of, God's creation, however you want to look at this, and then we have the fact that, Satan cannot create, he can only manipulate. And all of the stuff that we're here talking about all comes from an evil agenda. This is not, you know, we're not religious zealots. I'm not a religious zealot. I'm not a...
I actually deplore
you know,
religion.
I
quite a
despise
lot.
religion. I despise religion altogether. I am a very spiritual individual. I do believe I have a connection to God. I do believe he spared my life when I begged him and asked him to save me from Morgellons. Thank you, God, for letting me sit here today. And there's just so much involved, but I did want to mention one more thing about, Adam had mentioned the fibers. Morgellons is literally known as the fiber disease. Any information you look up on this will relate anything to fibers, because this was one of the first symptoms that people started finding. And I do want to mention the work of Miss Kara St. Louis at this point, who did research on these nanofibers and literally labeled them as nanotags. And so she says that they're involved with the satellite tracking. So if you just think of Google Map, if you put your address in Google Map, you'll see a picture of the roof of your house and your backyard, and maybe your car was in the driveway the day they took the photo of that. So if you can just imagine that they can see the roof of your house, if you have these nano tags within your body, and they can read them digitally from a satellite, they can literally track you. And so this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the digital lockdown, first of all, of planet Earth, with the digital technologies all around the satellites, all around the Earth.
5G, smart meters, satellites
5G,
everywhere.
smart meters, Gwen Towers, HARP project, all of these things we're talking about. But then you think about the smart meters on all the homes. And so, you know, neighborhoods run this way and this way in a grid pattern. So now you have smart meters on all of the homes. You literally have grid lockdowns in cities of these digital networks that eventually will have the ability to do this.
Yeah, good luck going anywhere that you can't be tracked by this. One little thing, but we're just going to leave this at the end of the video before we get to the next one, because I think we left a pretty well sciencey covered
Yes,
topic,
this
because
is great.
there's two aspects of this, as Carl Sagan says, to say science without spirituality. Saying they're somehow mutually exclusive does a great disservice to both. Left hand, right hand, prayer, bring them together, left brain, right brain. But just as a little side topic out there, if you get your phone ever, and this is something that I'm just going to paint for a little picture, you'll get your phone and it says, hey, GPS doesn't work, take and wave it in a figure eight. Don't do that. Guess what that's doing? Activating all this stuff so that you're tracking it and that's what it's doing. Don't do that. Just going to throw it out there, but thank you for watching on this one. We'll get into some further topics on the next video, but I think this is a great stopping point because of a lot of the things that we covered. And we're going to have so many resources we got to link in this that we have a very big job ahead of us to get all these links put in the YouTube, put in these videos. But thank you so much for joining. Thanks for putting up with us. And remember, don't believe either one of us. Look into it for yourself and make your own decisions. We're just kind of painting a picture and you decide what that picture means to you.
Bye.